Flames consume a wagon on the dusty trail, while terrified onlookers stand frozen in fear. One woman defies the crowd and charges into the inferno to save a screaming child trapped inside. Not knowing the little girl she's rescuing is the daughter of the most powerful Cherokee leader in the territory. A secret that will bind her fate to a warrior's heart and change the course of two worlds forever. The summer of 1874 brought relentless heat to the Arizona territory. The settlement of Copper Ridge, established only 4 years prior along the Verde River, had grown from a rough mining camp into a modest town of wooden buildings and dusty streets. It attracted prospectors, ranchers, and those seeking fortune or escape from their past lives in the East. Isabel Hammond, known to everyone as Belle, swept the floor of the Silver Star Saloon as the afternoon sun blazed through the windows. At 28 years old, she carried herself with quiet dignity despite her circumstances. Belle had arrived in Copper Ridge 2 years ago, fleeing an abusive marriage in St. Louis after her husband's gambling debts had nearly cost her everything. When he died in a bar fight over cards, Belle took what little money remained and headed west, only to find herself trapped in a different kind of servitude. The Silver Star's owner, a cruel man named Vernon Drake, had offered her work when she arrived penniless and desperate. But the job came with conditions that kept her bound to the saloon through manufactured debts she could never repay. Belle served drinks, cleaned tables, and endured the leering comments of miners and cowboys, but she drew a hard line that Drake had learned not to cross. Her sharp tongue and sharper wit had earned her a measure of respect. Even in this rough place, unlike most in Copper Ridge, Belle held no hatred for the native people who still moved through the territory. She had witnessed too much cruelty in her own life to judge others by the color of their skin or the language they spoke. This attitude set her apart in a town where suspicion and prejudice ran deep, especially after several skirmishes between settlers and Cherokee bands, protecting their ancestral lands. The Verde River flowed sluggishly that afternoon as Belle stepped outside for fresh air, wiping sweat from her brow. A wagon train had arrived earlier, dusty travelers seeking supplies before continuing their journey westward. Children played in the street under their parents, watchful eyes while men loaded provisions and women gathered gossip from the general store. Belle leaned against the saloon's wooden post, observing the familiar rhythm of frontier life. That's when she heard the first screams. Her head snapped toward the commotion at the edge of town where the wagon train had camped. Black smoke billowed into the clear sky, and orange flames licked hungrily at a covered wagon. Without thinking, Belle dropped her broom and ran toward the fire. As she drew closer, she could see people gathered in a wide circle, their faces masks of horror and indecision. A woman was screaming, held back by 2 men as she struggled to break free. "My baby! Someone help! She's still inside!" The woman shrieked, her voice raw with terror. Belle pushed through the crowd and saw the wagon fully engulfed in flames. The heat was intense even from 20 feet away. Through the smoke and fire, she could hear a child's terrified cries coming from within the burning structure. "Somebody do something!" Belle shouted at the men standing frozen. "There's a child in there!" A bearded prospector shook his head. "Too dangerous. That wagon's about to collapse. Whoever goes in there ain't coming out. She's just a kid." Belle's voice cut through the crackling flames. Sheriff Tom Brennan arrived, his face grim. "Stand back, folks. Ain't nothing we can do now but pray for the little one's soul." Belle stared at him in disbelief. "You're just going to let her burn?" "Look at those flames, Miss Belle," the sheriff said, his tone hard but not unkind. "It'd be suicide to go in there." Belle looked at the faces around her. Fear, pity, resignation, but no one moving to help. The child's screams grew more desperate, cutting through Belle like a knife. In that moment, something inside her broke and reformed into pure determination. She pulled off her apron and soaked it in a nearby water trough, wrapping it around her head and shoulders. Before anyone could stop her, Belle charged toward the burning wagon. "Belle, no!" Sheriff Brennan's shout was lost in the roar of the flames. The heat hit her like a physical wall, searing her exposed skin. Belle ducked low where the smoke was thinner and pushed toward the wagon's rear opening. The canvas cover had mostly burned away, revealing the wooden frame underneath consumed by fire. She could see a small figure huddled in the corner, coughing and crying. "Hold on, sweetheart. I'm coming." Belle called out, her voice muffled by the wet apron. She grabbed the burning tailgate and pulled herself up, ignoring the pain as hot metal scorched her palms. Inside the wagon, smoke choked the air and flames danced across supplies and furniture. The child, a little girl no more than 6 years old, sat pressed against a trunk, her dark eyes wide with terror. Belle crawled forward, feeling the wagon floor starting to give way beneath her. "Come here, honey. I've got you." The girl didn't move, paralyzed by fear. Belle reached out and grabbed her, pulling the child against her chest. The girl's small arms wrapped around Belle's neck in a death grip as Belle turned back toward the opening. A support beam cracked above them, showering sparks. Belle dove for the tailgate, just as the beam crashed down where they had been seconds before. She tumbled out of the wagon with the child clutched tightly, hitting the ground hard and rolling away from the inferno. Strong hands grabbed them both, dragging them further from the flames. Belle coughed violently, her lungs burning from the smoke. Someone poured water over her, and she gasped in relief as the cool liquid soothed her scorched skin. "You crazy woman," Sheriff Brennan muttered, but his eyes showed grudging admiration. "That was the bravest damn fool thing I ever saw." Belle barely heard him. She was focused on the little girl in her arms, checking for injuries. The child coughed and wheezed but appeared unharmed aside from soot covering her face and clothes. What struck Belle immediately was the girl's appearance. Her skin was bronze, her hair jet black and straight. Her features distinctly native. "She's Cherokee," someone in the crowd muttered. "Lord have mercy." "Belle just risked her life for an Indian child," another voice added. Not quite approval in the tone, Belle looked up sharply. "She's a child. That's all that matters." The girl's mother pushed through the crowd and fell to her knees beside them. But Belle noticed something odd. The woman was white, her face streaked with tears and soot. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you for saving her. I couldn't reach her in time. Is she yours?" Belle asked gently, still holding the trembling child. The woman hesitated, exchanging glances with a man who stepped forward. He too was white, dressed in traveling clothes dusty from the trail. "We were transporting her," the man said carefully. "Taking her to the mission school in Prescott. She was in our care." Something about his tone made Belle's instincts prickle, but the immediate crisis took precedence. "She needs to be checked by a doctor." "I'm fine," Doc Morrison said, appearing with his medical bag. He was one of the few people in town Belle respected, a man who treated everyone regardless of their ability to pay. "Let me see the child." Belle reluctantly released the girl to the doctor's care. The child's eyes never left Belle's face, even as Doc Morrison examined her. There was intelligence in those dark eyes, and something else, a wariness that seemed too old for such a young face. "She'd be all right," Doc Morrison announced. "Some smoke inhalation, but nothing serious. You, on the other hand," he turned to Belle, "have some nasty burns on your hands and arms. Come to my office and let me treat those." Belle looked down at her hands, surprised to see blistered skin and angry red marks. The adrenaline had kept the pain at bay, but now it crashed over her in waves. "I'll be fine. That wasn't a request," Doc Morrison said firmly. "Those burns could get infected. Don't make me tell Vernon he's losing his best worker because you were too stubborn to get treatment." As Doc Morrison led Belle away, she glanced back at the little girl. The child was watching her with an expression Belle couldn't quite read. The white couple had moved closer, speaking in hushed tones to Sheriff Brennan. In Doc Morrison's office, Belle sat quietly as he cleaned and bandaged her burns. "That was remarkably brave," he said, his voice gentle. "Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Most people in this town wouldn't have done it because she's Cherokee." Belle replied bitterly. Doc Morrison didn't argue. "There's a lot of fear right now. The government's been pushing the Cherokee west, and some bands have been resisting. Tensions are high. She's just a little girl," Belle said softly. "She didn't choose to be born into this conflict." "No, she didn't," Doc Morrison agreed. He finished wrapping her hands and sat back. "There's something you should know. That couple, the Harrisons, they claimed they were hired to transport several Cherokee children to the mission school. But their paperwork seems irregular," Belle frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean there are people who profit from taking native children, supposedly for education and civilization, but the reality is often much darker." Doc Morrison's expression was troubled. "I've seen children disappear into those schools and come out broken. If they come out at all." A cold dread settled in Belle's stomach. "Are you saying they stole her?" "I'm saying the situation deserves scrutiny," Doc Morrison replied carefully. "But Sheriff Brennan is inclined to believe the Harrisons. They have documents, or at least papers that look official." Belle stood despite the pain in her hands. "Where are they now?" "The Harrisons are at the hotel. The girl is with them." Doc Morrison caught her arm gently. "Belle, be careful. You've already made yourself conspicuous by saving her. Don't paint a bigger target on your back." But Belle was already heading for the door. Something felt deeply wrong about the entire situation, and she couldn't shake the memory of that little girl's eyes. Frightened, yes, but also silently pleading. The Copper Ridge Hotel was the nicest building in town, which wasn't saying much. Belle pushed through the door and found the Harrisons in the dining area, the little girl sitting between them, looking small and lost. When the child saw Belle, her face lit up with recognition. "Miss Hammond," Mrs. Harrison said, her voice cool. "We're very grateful for what you did, but as you can see, the child is fine now. We'll be continuing our journey to Prescott in the morning." Belle ignored her and knelt beside the girl. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The child looked at Mrs. Harrison, who shook her head slightly. "She doesn't speak English," the woman said quickly. "She's barely civilized. That's why she needs the mission school." "That's not true," Belle said quietly, her eyes never leaving the girl's face. "I can see she understands perfectly. Can't you, honey?" The little girl's lips trembled, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. Mr. Harrison stood abruptly. "Miss Hammond, you overstep. This child is our responsibility, granted by proper authority. Your heroics today were admirable, but they don't give you any claim to her." "I'm not claiming anything," Belle said, rising to face him. "I'm just making sure she's truly where she belongs." "She belongs in a school where she can learn civilized ways," Mrs. Harrison interjected. "Where she can be saved from her savage heritage." The words hit Belle like a slap. She had heard similar things said about the poor, about women like herself who worked in saloons, about anyone who didn't fit into proper society's narrow definitions. "There's nothing savage about a child," Belle said, her voice steel. Sheriff Brennan entered the hotel at that moment, his expression weary. "Miss Belle, I heard you were causing a disturbance." "I'm not causing anything, Tom. I'm asking questions that should have been asked already." Belle turned to him. "Have you verified their documents? Do you know for certain this child was given to them legally?" The sheriff's jaw tightened. "The Harrisons have papers signed by a territorial agent. That's all the verification I need." "And if those papers are forgeries? If this child was taken from her family?" Belle pressed. "That's a serious accusation," Mr. Harrison said, his face reddening. "Sheriff, are you going to allow this saloon woman to slander us?" Belle flinched at the insult but held her ground. "My character isn't on trial here. A child's welfare is enough." Sheriff Brennan held up his hand. "Miss Belle, I understand your concern, but the law is clear. The Harrisons have legal custody. There's nothing more to discuss." Belle looked down at the little girl, who watched the exchange with frightened eyes. In that moment, Belle saw her own younger self, trapped and helpless, at the mercy of people who saw her as property rather than a person. "Can I at least say goodbye to her?" Belle asked quietly. Mrs. Harrison hesitated, then nodded curtly. Belle knelt again and took the girl's small hands in her bandaged ones. "I'm sorry I can't do more," she whispered. "But you're stronger than you know. Remember that." The child surprised her by leaning forward and pressing her forehead against Belle's. A gesture so trusting and intimate, it brought tears to Belle's eyes. Then the girl whispered something in Cherokee, words Belle didn't understand but felt in her soul, as Belle left the hotel. Her heart was heavy with a sense of failure she couldn't shake. She returned to the Silver Star as the sun set, painting the sky blood red. Vernon Drake met her at the door, his expression annoyed. "Heard you played hero today," he said, eyeing her bandaged hands. "Those better not slow down your work. You've got tables to serve tonight." Belle pushed past him without answering. She had saved a child's life today, but somehow it felt like she had failed in a larger way. The image of that little girl's frightened face haunted her as she prepared for another night of serving drinks to men who looked through her rather than at her. What Belle didn't know was that at that very moment, a Cherokee warrior named Dakota was tracking the Harrison wagon from 3 days behind. Chief Oconostota had sent him to retrieve his daughter Uahali after she had been taken by the white couple during a raid on their camp while the chief and his warriors had been away hunting. The papers the Harrisons carried were indeed forgeries, purchased from a corrupt territorial agent, and Dakota was not alone. With him rode 3 of the chief's finest warriors, all sworn to bring Uahali home, or die trying. The night at the Silver Star Saloon dragged on with the usual noise and chaos. Belle moved through the crowded room with mechanical precision, her bandaged hands making every task more difficult. Miners fresh from their claims spent their earnings on whiskey and cards, their laughter growing louder and rougher as the hours passed. Vernon Drake watched from behind the bar, his calculating eyes following Belle's every movement, ensuring she earned her keep. Belle's mind wasn't on her work. She kept seeing Uahali's face, the fear and silent plea in those dark eyes. Something was deeply wrong about the Harrisons and their claimed authority over the child. Doc Morrison's words echoed in her thoughts about children disappearing into mission schools, about the darker realities hidden behind official papers. As she delivered another round of drinks to a table of rowdy cowboys, one of them grabbed her wrist. "How about you sit with us a spell, Belle? You look like you could use some company," he leered, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. Belle twisted her arm free with practiced ease. "Keep your hands to yourself, Cassidy, or you'll be drinking your next whiskey through broken teeth." Her voice was calm but edged with steel. The cowboy's friends laughed at his expense, and he released her with a muttered curse. Belle had learned long ago that showing weakness in a place like the Silver Star only invited worse treatment. Respect had to be earned and defended constantly. Near midnight, Sheriff Brennan entered the saloon, his face troubled. He caught Belle's eye and gestured toward an empty table in the corner. Curious, Belle brought him coffee without being asked and sat down across from him. "You look like a man carrying bad news," Belle observed. Studying his weathered face, Brennan took a long drink of coffee before responding. "Got word from Fort Verde. There's been Cherokee activity in the area. Warriors moving south along the Verde River. The commander thinks they might be tracking something." He paused, meeting Belle's gaze. "Or someone," Belle's heart quickened. "You think they're looking for the girl?" "It's possible," Brennan admitted. "The timing fits. If the Harrisons took that child from a Cherokee camp, her people would come for her. And if they reach Copper Ridge," he left the implications hanging, "then return her to them," Belle said immediately. "If she was taken illegally, she belongs with her own people. It's not that simple." Brennan rubbed his face wearily. "The Harrisons have papers. Without proof those documents are false. I can't just hand over a child to warriors who might be hostile. The town council would have my badge, and it could spark a conflict that gets people killed. Belle leaned forward intently. And keeping a stolen child won't spark a conflict? Tom, you know as well as I do that something's not right about the Harrisons. They're hiding something. What I know and what I can prove are two different things, Brennan said. The territorial government has policies about Indian children. Those policies are wrong in my opinion, but they're still law. Without evidence, the Harrisons violated those laws. My hands are tied. Belle sat back, frustration burning in her chest. So we just let them take her tomorrow? Deliver her to whatever fate awaits at that mission school? Unless something changes by dawn, yes. Brennan's expression showed he liked the situation no better than she did. I'm telling you this as a warning. If Cherokee warriors come to Copper Ridge looking for that girl, it could get ugly fast. Keep your head down and stay out of it. After Brennan left, Belle tried to focus on her work, but her mind churned with possibilities. She had no authority, no legal standing, no resources to challenge the Harrisons. But she also couldn't stand by and do nothing while a child was carried off to an uncertain fate. The saloon grew more raucous as the night wore on. A fight broke out near the poker tables, and Belle watched as two prospectors traded punches over accusations of cheating. Vernon Drake broke it up with his shotgun, firing a round into the ceiling that left everyone's ears ringing. Order restored, the gambling and drinking resumed as if nothing had happened. Belle served a group of ranch hands who had ridden in from the Box W spread south of town. They talked openly about the Cherokee situation, their words slurred by alcohol, but their prejudice crystal clear. Should have wiped them all out years ago, one declared, slamming his glass on the table. Every last savage man, woman, and child. Then we wouldn't have to worry about them raiding our settlements. Heard they scalp people alive, another added with morbid fascination. Cut off pieces of you while you're still breathing. Just to hear you scream. Belle bit her tongue to keep from responding. She had heard similar talk before, wild stories designed to justify hatred and violence. The reality, she suspected, was far more complicated than the simple narratives these men told themselves. When her shift finally ended near 3 in the morning, Belle climbed the narrow stairs to the tiny room she rented above the saloon. It was barely large enough for a bed and a washstand, but it was hers, the only private space she had in this world. She lit a candle and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her bandaged hands. The burns throbbed with a dull, persistent ache that made sleep seem impossible. Belle unwrapped the bandages carefully and examined the damage. Angry red blisters covered her palms and the inside of her fingers. Doc Morrison had done good work cleaning and treating the wounds, but they would take weeks to fully heal. A soft tapping at her window made Belle freeze. The sound came again, deliberate and measured. She approached cautiously and pulled back the thin curtain. A face appeared in the darkness outside, and Belle's breath caught. It was Holly, pressed against the window, her small face streaked with tears. Belle quickly opened the window, and the child practically fell into the room. Belle caught her and pulled her inside, closing the window behind them. "What are you doing here? How did you get away?" Holly was trembling, her eyes wide with fear. She clutched Belle's arm and began speaking rapidly in Cherokee, her words urgent and desperate. Belle couldn't understand the language, but the terror in the child's voice was unmistakable. "Slow down, honey. I can't understand you," Belle said gently, kneeling to the girl's level. She looked into Holly's eyes and saw not just fear but determination. This child had escaped from the Harrisons and come to the one person who had shown her kindness. Holly took a deep breath and seemed to gather herself. She pointed to Belle, then to herself, then made a gesture of two people walking together. The meaning was clear enough. "You want me to help you," Belle said quietly. Holly nodded vigorously. "If I help you, we'll both be in serious trouble. The Harrisons will say I kidnapped you. The sheriff will have to arrest me." The child's face crumpled, and tears spilled down her cheeks. She grasped Belle's hands, mindless of the bandages, and spoke again in Cherokee. Though Belle couldn't understand the words, she heard the plea in them, the desperate hope. Belle thought about her life in Copper Ridge. The endless cycle of serving drinks to men who saw her as less than human. The debts that kept her trapped in Vernon Drake's employment. The loneliness that had become her constant companion. What did she really have to lose? And what might she gain by doing something truly meaningful for once? She closed her eyes, thinking of the consequences. Vernon Drake would use this as an excuse to tighten his control over her debts. The town would turn against her completely. She could end up in jail or worse. But when she opened her eyes and saw Uohali's tear-stained face, she knew her decision was already made. "All right," Belle whispered. "I'll help you. But we have to be smart about this." She stood and began gathering her few possessions. A change of clothes, a little money she had managed to save hidden in a false bottom of her trunk, some dried food she kept for lean times, and a small knife her late husband had given her. "Can you take me to your people? Do you know the way?" Uohali's face brightened immediately. She nodded and pointed northwest, then held up fingers, counting days. Belle interpreted it as roughly 3 or 4 days' travel. That meant they needed horses and supplies, both of which required stealing if they had any hope of getting away before dawn. Belle changed into her most practical dress. A sturdy brown cotton that wouldn't show dirt as easily as her saloon clothes. She helped Uohali tie her hair back with a strip of cloth, tucking the dark strands out of sight. In the dim candlelight, Belle studied the child's face and saw intelligence far beyond her years. The kind of wisdom that came from witnessing too much hardship too young. "We're going to have to move quietly and quickly. Do you understand?" Belle whispered. The child nodded, her fear replaced by fierce determination that reminded Belle this girl was the daughter of a chief, raised with warrior courage in her blood. They slipped out of Belle's room and down the back stairs of the saloon. The wooden steps creaked under their weight, and Belle's heart hammered with each sound. In the main room below, she could hear Vernon Drake snoring from his quarters behind the bar. One loud noise and he would be awake, armed, and asking questions they couldn't answer. The streets of Copper Ridge were dark and quiet, most residents long asleep. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, and Belle froze until the sound faded. She led Uohali toward the livery stable at the edge of town, staying in the shadows cast by buildings and keeping away from the main street where patrolling might occur. The stable was unlocked, as was common in small frontier towns where trust still held some value. Belle moved quietly among the stalls, her eyes adjusting to the deeper darkness inside. The horses shifted and snorted softly at the intrusion. Belle selected 2 horses that looked sturdy but not so fine that their absence would be immediately noticed. A gray mare and a chestnut gelding that belonged to a rancher who kept several animals in town. She saddled them quickly despite her injured hands protesting the effort. Each strap buckled, each cinch tightened sent jolts of pain through her burned palms. Uohali tried to help, her small hands working alongside Belle's, and together they prepared the horses for their escape. A voice from the darkness nearly stopped Belle's heart. "Figured you might try something foolish." Doc Morrison stepped from the shadows of an empty stall, carrying 2 packs. "You'll need supplies if you're planning to reach Cherokee territory." Belle stared at him, speechless. Her mind raced with questions and fears. Had he come to stop them? To turn them in? But Doc Morrison smiled slightly and approached with the packs extended. "I've been practicing medicine on the frontier for 20 years. I've learned to recognize when someone's about to make a stand on principle. Regardless of the consequences," he handed her the packs, which were surprisingly heavy. Food, water, medical supplies, and some blankets. "It's not much, but it might keep you alive. Doc, if anyone finds out you helped us." Belle began, but he cut her off with a wave of his hand. I'm an old man with no family and few ties to this town. You're young with your whole life ahead of you, and this child deserves to be with her people." He turned to Uohali and spoke slowly, enunciating each word. "Your father is a great man. I met him once, years ago, when I treated some of his people for fever. He will be grateful to the woman who brings you home." Uohali seemed to understand his tone, if not all his words. She placed her small hand over her heart and bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect that brought moisture to Doc Morrison's eyes. The old doctor cleared his throat roughly and turned back to Belle. "Go now, before anyone discovers the girl is missing," Doc Morrison said urgently. "Head northwest along the river, then cut into the high country."
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
"The Harrisons will search the roads, but if you stick to game trails and rough country, you might stay ahead of any pursuit." He paused, his expression grave. "And Belle, there's something else you should know. I've heard talk that the Harrisons have done this before, taken Cherokee children under false pretenses. Some of those children were never seen again." The revelation sent ice through Belle's veins. "What happens to them?" "Nothing good," Doc Morrison said quietly. "The mission schools are bad enough, trying to strip away everything that makes these children who they are. But some children never make it that far. They disappear into households as servants, or worse. The territorial government turns a blind eye because it fits their policy of civilizing the natives." Belle felt sick. She looked at Uohali, who watched them both with those intelligent dark eyes, understanding that they spoke of grave matters even if she couldn't follow the English words. All the more reason to get her home. Belle impulsively hugged the old doctor, careful of her injured hands. "Thank you. For everything. For seeing past what this town thinks of me." "Don't thank me yet," he replied gruffly, returning the embrace briefly before stepping back. "Just get that child home safely. And Belle, if you're very lucky, you might run into the Cherokee warriors who are surely tracking her. Don't run from them. They're her best chance of getting home, and yours of surviving this foolishness." Belle lifted Uohali onto the gray mare, then mounted the chestnut gelding. The child settled into the saddle with practiced ease, her small hands gripping the reins confidently. With a final nod to Doc Morrison, they rode quietly out of the stable and into the darkness beyond Copper Ridge. The night air was cool against Belle's face. And above them, stars blazed in the vast Arizona sky like distant campfires. They followed the Verde River northwest as Doc Morrison had suggested, keeping to the shadows near the tree line where moonlight couldn't betray them. The horses moved carefully over the uneven ground, their hooves muffled by pine needles and soft earth. Uohali rode with surprising skill for such a young child, clearly accustomed to horses from an early age, sitting straight in the saddle and moving with the animal's rhythm. As dawn began to paint the eastern sky with streaks of pink and gold, Belle knew the alarm would soon be raised. The Harrisons would discover Uohali missing from their hotel room. Vernon Drake would find Belle's room empty and her few possessions gone. Sheriff Brennan would have no choice but to organize a search party, and suspicion would immediately fall on the woman who had risked her life to save the Cherokee child. They needed to cover as much ground as possible before the pursuit began in earnest. The terrain grew rougher as they climbed into the foothills. Scrub brush gave way to juniper and pine, and the air carried the sharp scent of resin. Belle's burns throbbed with each movement, but she pushed the pain aside and focused on keeping them moving. Uohali looked back at her occasionally, as if checking to make sure Belle was still there. Still committed to this dangerous journey. Around mid-morning, they stopped to rest the horses and eat some of the food Doc Morrison had provided. Uohali sat beside Belle on a flat rock overlooking the river valley far below, sharing dried meat and hardtack. The child pointed to Belle's hands and spoke in Cherokee, her tone concerned and gentle. "My hands will heal," Belle assured her. though the burns throbbed painfully beneath the bandages that were already showing signs of seepage. "Don't worry about me. We just need to get you home safely. That's all that matters now." Uahali touched Belle's face gently with her small fingers, tracing the line of her cheek as if memorizing her features. Then she placed her hand over her own heart and spoke a single word that sounded like "Igato," repeating it with emphasis and emotion. Belle didn't know the word's meaning, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable. This child was forming an attachment, seeing Belle not just as a rescuer but as something more significant. The realization brought both warmth and fear to Belle's heart. What would happen when they reached the Cherokee camp? Would they see her as the hero who returned their chief's daughter, or as another white person who had caused trouble? Would they believe she acted out of compassion or suspect ulterior motives? They rode through the afternoon, climbing into rougher country where towering pines replaced the scrub brush of the lower elevations. The air grew noticeably cooler and carried the scent of wild sage and mountain streams. Several times Belle thought she saw movement in the trees, shadows that might have been deer or elk, or might have been something else entirely. Each time her hand moved instinctively to the knife at her belt, as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Belle knew they would need to make camp soon. Traveling in darkness through unfamiliar territory would be foolish and dangerous. She chose a sheltered spot beneath an overhanging rock formation that would hide their fire from casual observation and provide protection from wind. While Belle gathered deadwood for a fire, Uahali explored the immediate area with the fearless curiosity of a child raised in harmony with the wilderness. She moved through the underbrush like a small shadow, her steps nearly silent. Belle watched her, marveling at skills learned so young. The little girl returned carrying handfuls of plants that Belle didn't recognize, roots and leaves and small berries. Uahali arranged them carefully on a flat stone, separating them into different piles. Then she made gestures of eating some and pointed to others while shaking her head vigorously, clearly indicating which were safe and which were poisonous. Belle trusted the child's knowledge, born from a lifetime of learning from her people. She tried the plants Uahali offered and found them surprisingly palatable, some bitter like dandelion greens but others almost sweet. They supplemented the dried provisions with this wild food, stretching their supplies further. As darkness fell complete and stars emerged overhead, they sat close to their small fire. Belle tried to imagine what tomorrow would bring, what challenges and dangers awaited them in the high country. Would they encounter the Cherokee warriors Doc Morrison mentioned? Would the Harrisons' pursuit catch them first? Would they simply get lost in the vast wilderness and perish? Each possibility carried its own terrors. Uahali leaned against Belle's shoulder, her small body gradually relaxing as exhaustion claimed her. Belle wrapped a blanket around them both, sharing warmth against the mountain cold. She stared into the flames, watching them dance and flicker, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake or the first truly meaningful decision of her life. Either way, there was no turning back now. The path forward led only deeper into unknown territory. What Belle didn't know was that less than 5 miles away, Dakota and his warriors had found the tracks of 2 horses heading into the high country. The tracks were fresh, made within the last few hours, and one set of prints was noticeably lighter, consistent with a child's weight. Dakota's heart had leaped with hope as he signaled his 3 companions to follow. They would push through the night and reach the travelers by dawn. After days of tracking the Harrisons, they had finally found a new trail, one that suggested someone had taken Uahali away from her captors. Whether this person was friend or foe remained to be seen. Dawn broke cold and misty over the mountain camp where Belle and Uahali had spent the night. Belle woke with a start, her body stiff from sleeping on the hard ground and her hands throbbing with renewed pain. The fire had died to gray ash and a thin layer of frost covered their blanket. Uahali still slept curled against her side, breathing softly, Belle carefully extracted herself from the blanket and stood, stretching her aching muscles. The high country stretched around them in every direction, pine-covered ridges rising towards snow-capped peaks in the distance. It was beautiful and utterly unforgiving terrain. One wrong turn could lead them into box canyons or impassable cliffs. She rekindled the fire and was heating water for coffee when Uahali stirred awake. The child sat up, her dark hair tousled and her eyes still heavy with sleep. But when she saw Belle, her face brightened with a smile that warmed Belle more than the growing fire. They shared a simple breakfast of hardtack softened in hot water and some of the wild plants Uahali had gathered the previous evening. As they ate, Belle tried to plan their route for the day. They needed to keep moving northwest, staying in the high country where pursuit would be more difficult, but where the terrain itself posed constant danger. Belle was saddling the horses when Uahali suddenly grabbed her arm, her small fingers digging in with surprising strength. The child's body had gone rigid, her eyes fixed on something in the trees beyond their camp. Belle followed her gaze, but saw nothing except shadows and morning mist. "What is it?" Belle whispered, her hand moving to the knife at her belt. Uahali spoke rapidly in Cherokee, pointing toward the tree line. Then Belle saw it. Movement among the pines, deliberate and purposeful. Not an animal. Her heart hammered as she pulled Uahali behind her, positioning herself between the child and whatever approached. 4 figures emerged from the mist like spirits taking form. They were Cherokee warriors, that much was immediately clear from their dress and bearing. They moved with the fluid grace of men completely at home in the wilderness, their faces painted for war, their weapons carried with practiced ease. The lead warrior was tall and powerfully built, his long black hair adorned with feathers and his chest bare despite the cold. Belle's breath caught in her throat. This was the moment that would determine everything. She could run, but they would catch her within minutes. She could fight, but 4 warriors against 1 woman with a knife was no contest. Her only option was to stand her ground and hope they understood she meant Uahali no harm. Uahali suddenly broke free from Belle's protective grasp and ran forward with a cry of joy. "Edota! Dakota!" The child threw herself at the lead warrior, who caught her and lifted her high, his stern face transforming with relief and love. Belle watched in stunned silence as the warrior held Uahali close, speaking to her in rapid Cherokee. The child responded just as quickly, gesturing back toward Belle repeatedly. The other 3 warriors had fanned out, surrounding Belle but not threatening her directly. Their dark eyes assessed her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The lead warrior finally set Uahali down and approached Belle. He was even more imposing up close. Easily 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and a presence that commanded respect. His face was angular and handsome, marked by a thin scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. But his eyes held intelligence as well as strength. "You are the woman who pulled Uahali from the burning wagon," he said in heavily accented but clear English. "She speaks of your courage," Belle found her voice, though it came out shakier than she intended. "I only did what anyone should have done. She's just a child." "Not anyone," the warrior corrected. "Your people stood and watched. Only you acted." He placed his fist over his heart in a gesture of respect. "I am Dakota, 2nd war chief of our band. Uahali is daughter of Chief Okanastota, my brother in all but blood." "Belle Hammond," she replied, then added, "I'm helping Uahali get back to her father. The people who took her, the Harrisons, they were going to take her to a mission school. But something about them felt wrong, so when she came to me for help, I couldn't refuse." Dakota studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke to his companions in Cherokee. One of them, a younger warrior with quick eyes, responded with what sounded like questions. Dakota answered firmly, and the younger warrior nodded, though his suspicious glance at Belle suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. My warriors ask why a white woman risks so much for a Cherokee child, Dakota explained. They wonder if you seek reward or have other reasons. Bell met his gaze steadily. I don't want anything except to know she's safe. I've seen enough cruelty in my life to recognize it in others. Those Harrisons, whatever papers they carried, they were taking her somewhere bad. I couldn't let that happen. Uahali tugged at Dakota's arm and spoke urgently, pointing at Bell's bandaged hands. Dakota's expression shifted to concern. He stepped closer and gently took Bell's hands, examining the bandages that were now dirty and bloodstained from their journey. You were injured saving her. It wasn't a question. The wagon was burning. The metal was hot, Bell said simply. Dakota called to one of his warriors who approached carrying a leather pouch. The warrior, older than the others with gray threading through his black hair, knelt beside Bell and began unwrapping her bandages with surprising gentleness. When he saw the angry burns beneath, he made a clicking sound with his tongue and spoke to Dakota. Nalani says these wounds need better treatment, or they will fester, Dakota translated. He will prepare medicine. Bell wanted to protest that they should keep moving. That pursuit from Copper Ridge might not be far behind. But the throbbing pain in her hands and the concern in Uahali's eyes made her nod acceptance. Nalani worked quickly, crushing plants from his pouch and mixing them with water to form a paste. When he applied it to Bell's burns, the cooling sensation was immediate and blessed. As Nalani worked, Dakota questioned Bell about the Harrisons, about Copper Ridge, about the pursuit that would surely follow. Bell answered honestly, describing the town's suspicion of natives, Sheriff Brennan's position, and Vernon Drake's control over her through debt. She held nothing back, sensing that deception would be far more dangerous than truth with these men. This Drake, Dakota said thoughtfully. He will want revenge for your leaving. He'll want his property back, Bell said bitterly. That's how he sees me, as something he owns through my debts to him. The younger warrior who had questioned Bell's motives spoke sharply in Cherokee. Dakota responded in kind, his tone brooking no argument. The younger man subsided, but continued to watch Bell with mistrust. Yansa believes you may lead your people to our camp, Dakota explained. That saving Uahali is a trick to find where we hide. Bell felt anger flash through her. If I wanted to betray you, I would have stayed in Copper Ridge and told them where to find the girl. Instead I'm here, hunted by my own people, with nothing but the clothes on my back. Dakota held up his hand. I told Yansa the same. A woman who burns her hands to save a child she does not know is not one who practices deception. He paused, his dark eyes searching Bell's face. But I must ask, Bell Hammond, what will you do when we reach our camp? Your people will not welcome you back after this. You have made yourself outcast. The question struck at the heart of Bell's own fears. She had acted on impulse and principle, not considering the full consequences. Going back to Copper Ridge meant arrest at best, hanging at worst. But staying with the Cherokee, even if they allowed it, meant living as an outsider in a culture she barely understood. I don't know, Bell admitted quietly. I only knew I had to help her. Everything else, I suppose I'll figure out when the time comes. Uahali, who had been standing close to Dakota, suddenly moved to Bell and wrapped her small arms around her waist. The child looked up at Dakota and spoke earnestly in Cherokee, her tone pleading. Bell didn't need translation to understand the girl was advocating for her. Dakota's expression softened as he listened. When Uahali finished, he placed his hand on her head gently. She says you are Igato, which means friend or mother in her language. She says you sang to her in the night when she was frightened. She says your spirit is good. Bell felt tears prick her eyes. She knelt and hugged Uahali close. Tell her she's very brave. Braver than I am. After Dakota translated, Uahali shook her head vigorously and replied in Cherokee. Dakota smiled slightly, the expression transforming his stern features. She says you are the brave one, diving into fire while others watched. She says the spirits sent you to save her. The fourth warrior, who had been silently watching the entire exchange, finally spoke. He was the oldest of the group, with weathered features and eyes that seemed to see more than the physical world. He spoke at length in Cherokee, his tone measured and thoughtful. Dakota listened respectfully, then nodded. He turned to Belle. "Kanuna is our elder. He says you have proven yourself through action, not words. He says the spirits work in mysterious ways, sometimes using unlikely vessels. He believes you should come with us to Chief Oconostota." "And what do you believe?" Belle asked Dakota directly. The warrior considered her question carefully. "I believe Uahali would not be alive without you. I believe you risked everything when you had no reason to do so, except the goodness of your heart. I believe my chief will want to meet the woman who saved his only child." He paused, then added, "And I believe you have the spirit of a warrior, even if you do not carry yourself as one." Belle stood, facing him squarely. "Then I'll come. But I need to know what happens if your chief decides I'm not welcome. Will you let me leave peacefully? If Chief Oconostota says you must go, we will give you supplies and a horse, and point you towards settlements far from Copper Ridge where you might start fresh." Dakota promised. "But I do not think that will happen. My chief values courage and honors debts. You have given him back his greatest treasure." They broke camp quickly, the warriors moving with practiced efficiency. Belle noticed how they erased all signs of their presence, scattering the fire ash, covering tracks, removing any indication that people had camped there. It spoke to a life lived constantly aware of threats, always ready to disappear. Dakota lifted Uahali onto his horse, and the child settled in front of him with obvious comfort and trust. Nalani helped Belle mount her horse, checking that the reins were positioned so they wouldn't rub against her freshly treated burns. The kindness of these gestures, coming from men who had every reason to distrust her, touched Belle deeply. They rode northwest through increasingly rugged terrain. The warriors moved through the wilderness as if following an invisible map, never hesitating at forks and game trails or uncertain about direction. Belle tried to memorize landmarks but quickly realized she would be hopelessly lost without guides. Around midday, they stopped at a stream to water the horses and eat. Yansa, the young warrior who distrusted Belle, approached her while she knelt by the stream. He spoke in halting English, clearly uncomfortable with the language. "You save Uahali." "This is good," he said stiffly. "But white people bring death to Cherokee. They take our lands, kill our families, steal our children. How do I know you are different?" Belle met his challenging gaze. "You don't. You can only judge me by what I do, not by what others who share my skin color have done." She paused, then added, "I've been hurt by people who looked like me. I know that evil doesn't have one face. Neither does goodness." Yansa considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Dakota trusts you. Kanuna says spirits guide you. But I watch." He tapped his eyes. "If you bring danger to our people, warrior or not, I will stop you." "I'd expect nothing less," Belle said honestly. "If I were in your place, I'd feel the same." Something in Belle's directness seemed to satisfy Yansa. He nodded once and walked away. Not friendly but perhaps slightly less hostile. As they continued their journey, Dakota rode alongside Belle. Uahali had fallen asleep against his chest, exhausted from the emotion and excitement of reunion. The warrior's hand rested protectively on the child's back. "You care for her deeply," Belle observed. "I was there when she was born," Dakota said quietly. "Her mother, Ayana, was sister to my wife. When Ayana died bringing Uahali into the world, I swore to protect the child as my own." His jaw tightened. "When the Harrisons raided our camp while we hunted, when they took Uahali and 2 other children, I felt I had failed my oath." "There were other children?" Belle's heart sank. 2 boys, brothers, aged 8 and 10. Dakota's expression was grim. We tracked the Harrisons to a way station where they sold the boys to a man heading east. We could not follow both trails. Chief Oconostota chose to pursue his daughter. The boy's parents still search, but the trail grows cold. The revelation made Belle feel sick. How many children had been stolen this way? How many families torn apart by people like the Harrisons who saw native children as commodities? I'm sorry. That's inadequate, but I don't have better words. You saved one, Dakota said, when you could have saved none. That matters. They rode in companionable silence for a time. Belle found herself studying Dakota when he wasn't looking, noting the strength in his profile, the gentleness with which he held the sleeping child, the constant awareness in his eyes that scanned their surroundings for threats. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who knew his purpose and his place in the world. Tell me about your chief, Belle said eventually. Uahali's father, Oconostota, is a great leader, Dakota said with obvious respect. He keeps our band together when others have been scattered or destroyed. He is fierce in protecting our people, but also wise enough to know when to fight and when to fade into the mountains. The white soldiers call him a ghost because he appears and disappears like mist. Will he accept me? Belle asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. Dakota looked at her directly. He will honor what you have done. But Belle Hammond, you must understand that trust between our peoples has been broken too many times. Some in our camp will welcome you. Others will see only your white skin and remember losses. You will need to prove yourself, not once but many times. I understand, Belle said. Though the prospect was daunting, there is something else. Dakota's expression became more serious. Chief Oconostota lost his wife 3 years ago. Since then, he has not taken another. Uahali needs a mother's guidance as she grows. The women of our village help, but it is not the same. Belle understood what he was implying and felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm not looking for a husband, especially not one who would see me as a convenient solution to his problems. And he is not looking for a wife chosen by circumstance, Dakota replied. I speak only of possibilities, not certainties. But I have seen how Uahali looks at you, and I think when Oconostota sees that look, he will wonder if the spirits have brought you for reasons beyond saving his daughter from fire. Before Belle could respond, Nalani called out sharply from where he rode ahead. The older warrior pointed back the way they had come, where a thin column of smoke rose in the distance. Dakota's expression hardened immediately. Riders, he said curtly. Many of them, moving fast. Belle's stomach dropped. The pursuit from Copper Ridge had caught up sooner than expected. Sheriff Brennan must have organized a large posse, perhaps including some of the cavalry from Fort Verde. Dakota spoke rapidly to his warriors in Cherokee. Kanuna and Yansa immediately urged their horses to a faster pace. While Nalani dropped back to ride beside Belle, Dakota himself moved to the front. Still holding the now awake Uahali. They track us, Nalani said in broken English. We must ride hard. You keep pace, yes? Belle nodded, though fear gripped her heart. The terrain was growing steeper and more treacherous. One wrong step by her horse could send them both tumbling down a slope. But behind them came men who would see her hanging from a gallows, and Uahali returned the captors who meant her harm. They pushed the horses as fast as the dangerous ground allowed. Pine branches whipped at Belle's face and arms. Rocks clattered under hooves. Several times her horse stumbled, and only Belle's grip on the saddle horn kept her seated. Her burned hands screamed in protest, but she ignored the pain and focused only on staying mounted and keeping pace. Dakota led them through a maze of rocky outcroppings and dense forest that seemed impassable until they were right upon the narrow paths. Belle realized the warrior was using his intimate knowledge of the terrain to their advantage, taking routes that would slow the pursuit and perhaps even lose them entirely. After an hour of hard riding, they emerged onto a high ridge that offered a view back across miles of wilderness. In the distance, Belle could see riders, at least 20 of them, spread out in a search pattern. They were still far behind, but clearly determined. Will they follow us into Cherokee territory? Belle asked breathlessly. Some will, Dakota said grimly. Those with hate in their hearts or those who care only for the bounty Vernon Drake has surely offered for your return. He looked at Belle with new respect. You ride well for a saloon woman. I grew up on a farm in Missouri, Belle said. I could ride before I could read. Holly reached out from Dakota's arms toward Belle, speaking urgently in Cherokee.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story.
Dakota translated. She wants to ride with you. She says you are frightened, and she will be brave for you. The offer, coming from a child not yet 7 years old, brought tears to Belle's eyes. Tell her I'm all right. Tell her we're going to get her home safely. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, they finally saw their destination. In a hidden valley surrounded by high cliffs and accessible only through narrow passes, the Cherokee camp spread before them. Dozens of lodges made from poles and bark sat in organized rows, smoke rising from cooking fires. Children playing near a stream that cut through the valley's center. It was beautiful and peaceful, a sanctuary hidden from the world that sought to destroy it. And somewhere in that camp was Chief Oconostota, the man whose daughter Belle had saved. The man who would determine her fate. Dakota raised his hand in a signal. And from the camp below, answering calls rose up. Warriors emerged from lodges, weapons ready, responding to the alert. But when they saw Dakota and recognized the small figure on his horse, the defensive posture changed to celebration. They descended into the valley as the sun touched the horizon. Belle's heart pounding with anticipation and fear about what awaited her among these people who had every reason to hate those who looked like her. The Cherokee camp erupted in joyous chaos as Dakota rode through the narrow pass with Holly in his arms. Women dropped their work and ran forward with cries of relief and happiness. Children stopped their games to stare wide-eyed at the returning warriors. Warriors emerged from lodges, their stern faces breaking into rare smiles at the sight of their chief's daughter, safe and unharmed. Belle hung back slightly, suddenly acutely aware of how out of place she looked. Her dirty dress, her pale skin, her bandaged hands, everything about her screamed outsider. She watched as Dakota dismounted and was immediately surrounded by people reaching out to touch Holly. To assure themselves the child was real and safe, an older woman pushed through the crowd. Her gray-streaked hair braided with beads and her face marked by lines of worry and age. She took Holly from Dakota's arms and held the child close, speaking rapidly in Cherokee while tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. Holly hugged her back fiercely, and Belle understood this must be someone who had helped raise the girl after her mother's death. Then the crowd parted, and a man stepped forward who could only be Chief Oconostota. He was tall and powerfully built like Dakota, but where the younger warrior moved with the fluid grace of a hunter, the chief carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of authority. His face was angular and handsome, despite the hardship etched into every line. His long black hair was adorned with eagle feathers that marked his status, and his chest bore scars that spoke of many battles survived. Oconostota's eyes, dark and penetrating, went immediately to his daughter. The mask of leadership fell away, replaced by pure paternal love and relief. He knelt and opened his arms, and Holly broke free from the older woman to run to her father. The chief caught her and held her so tightly Belle feared he might hurt the child. But Holly only laughed and cried simultaneously, her small hands grasping her father's hair. The chief spoke to his daughter in Cherokee, his deep voice cracking with emotion. Holly responded between sobs, her words tumbling out in a rush. Belle watched the reunion and felt both joy at seeing them together and a sharp pang of loneliness. She had no family, no one who would hold her like that. No place where she truly belonged. Dakota approached Oconostota and spoke quietly. Gesturing toward Belle, the chief's eyes rose from his daughter to study the white woman, who sat uncertainly on her horse at the edge of the gathering. His expression was unreadable as he handed Uohali back to the older woman and walked toward Belle with measured steps. Belle dismounted on shaky legs, her body exhausted from the hard ride and her nerves stretched thin. She stood straight despite her fear, meeting the chief's gaze as he stopped a few feet away. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 40 years old, his face showing the weight of leadership and loss. "You are Belle Hammond." His English was better than Dakota's, carrying only a slight accent. "The woman who pulled my daughter from fire when your people stood watching." "Yes," Belle said simply, not knowing what else to say. Oconostota studied her for a long moment that felt like an eternity. Belle forced herself to remain still under his scrutiny, to not look away or show the fear that churned in her stomach. Finally, the chief placed his fist over his heart in the same gesture Dakota had made. "You have given me back my heart," Oconostota said quietly. "Uohali is all I have left of her mother, all that gives my life meaning beyond fighting and leading. Without her, I would be a shell of a man." He paused, his voice thickening. "There are no words in Cherokee or English sufficient to express my gratitude." Belle felt tears spring to her eyes. "She's a remarkable child. Anyone would have done the same, but they did not," Oconostota said firmly. "Only you. Dakota tells me you also helped her escape from the thieves who stole her, that you risked your freedom and your life to bring her toward our lands." "I couldn't let them take her to that school," Belle said. "Something about those people felt wrong. And when she came to me for help, I couldn't turn her away." Oconostota nodded slowly. "You have made yourself outcast among your people for the sake of a Cherokee child you did not know. This speaks of courage and character rare in any person. White or native," he turned and spoke loudly in Cherokee, his words carrying to the assembled crowd. Dakota stepped close to Belle and translated quietly. "The chief says you are welcome at our camp as an honored guest. He says anyone who harms you or speaks against you will answer to him personally. He says you have earned the protection of the Cherokee through your actions." Relief flooded through Belle so intensely her knees nearly buckled. Nalani appeared at her elbow, steadying her with a gentle hand. The older warrior smiled, his weathered face creasing with warmth. "You are safe now," Nalani said in his broken English. "Cherokee do not forget debts." "You are Igato, friend." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Belle could see some faces showing welcome and gratitude, particularly among the women who understood what it meant to fear for a child's safety. But other faces showed suspicion and hostility, especially among some of the younger warriors who had likely lost family members to white violence. Uohali broke free from the older woman again and ran to Belle, wrapping her arms around Belle's waist. The child looked up at her father and spoke earnestly in Cherokee, clearly advocating for Belle with all the fierce determination of her young heart. Oconostota listened to his daughter with visible emotion. When she finished, he spoke to her gently, and she nodded before reluctantly releasing Belle. The chief then addressed Belle directly. "My daughter says you are Igato, which can mean friend or can mean mother. She says you sang to her in the darkness and made her feel safe. She says the spirits sent you to save her." His dark eyes searched Belle's face. "She asks if you will stay with our people." Belle's heart hammered. "I don't know if that's possible. I'm grateful for your protection and welcome, but I'm an outsider here. I don't speak your language or know your ways. These things can be learned," Oconostota said. "What matters is the spirit, and Uohali sees your spirit clearly." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "I must speak plainly. My daughter has grown up without a mother's guidance. The women of our village care for her, but it is not the same. She has attached herself to you in a way I have not seen before." Belle understood what he was implying and felt panic rise. Chief Oconostota, I'm honored, but I can't be a replacement for her mother. I barely know how to take care of myself. I do not speak of replacement, the chief said quietly. No one could replace Ayanna. But perhaps the spirits have brought you for a reason beyond saving Uahali from fire. Perhaps they mean for you to fill an emptiness in her life and in mine. Before Bell could respond, a commotion at the camp's entrance drew everyone's attention. A young warrior rode in at full gallop, his horse lathered with sweat. He called out urgently in Cherokee, pointing back toward the pass. Dakota's expression turned grim. He spoke rapidly with the young warrior, then turned to Oconostota. The chief's face hardened as he listened, and Bell knew without understanding the words that the news was bad. The white men who pursue you have reached the valley's edge, Oconostota said to Bell. They are many, and they carry the authority of your law. They demand you be returned to face justice for theft and kidnapping. Bell's stomach dropped. How many? The scout counted 25 men, including soldiers from the fort, Dakota answered. They are armed for battle, not negotiation. The camp erupted in activity. Warriors rushed to gather weapons while women hurried children toward the far end of the valley where the lodges offered some protection. Bell watched the organized chaos and felt crushing guilt. These people had just gotten Uahali back, and now she had brought danger to their sanctuary. I'll go to them, Bell said quickly. I'll turn myself in. There's no reason for your people to fight because of me. No. Oconostota's voice cut through the noise like a blade. You are under my protection now. To surrender, you would dishonor my word and show weakness to those who already take too much from us. But they'll attack, Bell protested. People will die because I broke their laws. You broke unjust laws to save a child, the chief corrected. If they attack, they prove themselves no better than the thieves who stole Uahali, he turned to Dakota. Gather the warriors. We will meet these men at the pass and hear what they have to say. Perhaps words can prevent bloodshed. Dakota nodded and began calling out names in Cherokee. Warriors assembled quickly, checking weapons and mounting horses with practiced efficiency. Bell noticed that even the youngest warriors, boys barely older than 15, prepared to fight if necessary. Uahali clung to the older woman, her eyes wide with fear as she watched the preparations. Bell knelt beside her, ignoring the pain in her hands. It's going to be all right, sweetheart. Your father is very strong and very wise. The child spoke rapidly in Cherokee, her voice trembling. The older woman translated in halting English. She says she does not want you to leave. She says you belong here now. Bell hugged Uahali tightly. I don't want to leave either. But I won't let people get hurt because of me. Oconostota approached, his face set in hard lines of determination. You will stay here with the women and children. Dakota and I will speak with these men. If they will not listen to reason, we will defend our home. Let me come with you, Bell said urgently. Let me try to talk to them. Sheriff Brennan is a decent man. Maybe I can make him understand. The chief considered this, then shook his head. If they see you, they will try to take you by force. That will start the battle I hope to avoid. And if they don't see me, they'll assume I'm being held against my will, Bell countered. They'll attack anyway. At least let me show them I'm here by choice, Dakota spoke up. She has wisdom in this. If the sheriff sees Bell standing freely among us, it may give him pause. Oconostota's jaw tightened, but after a moment he nodded. You will come. But you will stay back from the front line, and if fighting starts, you will retreat to safety immediately. Bell agreed, though she had no intention of running if violence erupted. She had caused this situation, and she would face the consequences. They rode toward the narrow pass as the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist. 20 Cherokee warriors accompanied the chief, with Bell riding beside Dakota in the middle of the formation. As they approached the pass, Bell could see the posse assembled at the valley's entrance. Sheriff Brennan sat at the front on his big roan horse, his face grim under his wide-brimmed hat. Beside him was a cavalry lieutenant Bell didn't recognize, young and stiff with military bearing. Behind them, townsmen from Copper Ridge mixed with soldiers, all armed with rifles and pistols. Bell spotted Vernon Drake among them, his face twisted with anger. The two groups faced each other across 50 yards of open ground. Tension hung thick in the air, fingers near triggers, muscles coiled for action. One wrong word or sudden movement could unleash hell. O'Connor rode forward slowly, his bearing regal despite facing superior numbers. Dakota translated quietly as the chief spoke in Cherokee, his words measured and powerful. "I am O'Connor, leader of this band. You have entered Cherokee lands without permission. State your business and depart." Sheriff Brennan cleared his throat. "Chief, I mean no disrespect, but we're here under territorial authority. We're looking for Belle Hammond, a white woman who kidnapped a child and stole horses from Copper Ridge. The woman Belle Hammond is here as my honored guest," O'Connor replied through Dakota's translation. "She saved my daughter's life when white people stood by and watched. She brought Uohali safely through dangerous country to return her to her family. She is guilty of nothing but courage and compassion." "That may be," the cavalry lieutenant interjected, his voice clipped and officious. "But she broke territorial law. She must return to face trial." Belle urged her horse forward before anyone could stop her. She rode out from behind the Cherokee warriors, ignoring Dakota's hissed warning. The posse members stirred at her appearance, several raising their rifles. "I'm here, Tom," Belle called out to Sheriff Brennan. "As you can see, I'm not being held prisoner. I came here of my own free will to return a child to her father." Vernon Drake pushed his horse forward, his face purple with rage. "You stole from me, Belle. You owe me money and you ran out on your debts. You're coming back even if I have to drag you." "I owe you nothing," Belle said, her voice carrying across the space between them. "You kept me trapped with false debts and impossible terms. I'm done being your property." "You're a thief and a kidnapper," Drake spat. "You stole horses and took that Indian brat. I saved a child from people who had stolen her first," Belle shot back. "The Harrisons had no legal right to Uohali. They took her in a raid on this camp. Their papers were forgeries." Sheriff Brennan held up his hand for silence. "Belle, is that true? Can you prove the Harrisons stole that child?" "Ask them," Belle challenged. "Ask them how they came to have a Cherokee chief's daughter in their possession. Ask them about the other children they've taken and sold." The cavalry lieutenant looked uncomfortable. "The Harrisons are legitimate contractors working under territorial policy to bring Native children to mission schools for education. They're child thieves working under the cover of corrupt bureaucracy," Belle said flatly. "And you know it, even if you won't admit it." O'Connor spoke again, his voice hard. "The white man's laws mean nothing on Cherokee land. Belle Hammond is under my protection. If you want her, you will have to take her by force. And I promise you, the cost will be high." The standoff stretched taut. Belle could see Sheriff Brennan calculating odds and consequences. He was outnumbered here in the valley, but reinforcements from Fort Verde could be summoned. This could escalate into a wider conflict that would bring more soldiers and more death. "There's another way," Belle said suddenly, an idea forming. "The Harrisons are still in Copper Ridge, aren't they? Tom, you could arrest them. Investigate their papers properly. If it turns out they were operating illegally, then I haven't kidnapped anyone. I've simply returned a stolen child to her rightful family." Brennan's expression suggested he hadn't considered this angle. The cavalry lieutenant started to object, but the sheriff cut him off. "It's a fair point. If the Harrisons' documents are forgeries, then Belle acted rightly, even if she went about it the wrong way." "This is ridiculous," Vernon Drake snarled. "She still stole my horses. Horses I'll gladly pay for once I have the means," Belle said. "But I won't come back to Copper Ridge to be your prisoner again." Oconostoda had been listening to Dakota's quick translations. Now he spoke again, and his words made Belle's heart race. The chief says, if the sheriff will investigate the Harrisons and clear your name, he will provide horses to replace those taken. Dakota translated. He says this is fair exchange and will prove Cherokee honor. Sheriff Brennan looked torn. Belle could see him weighing justice against politics, his own conscience against territorial authority. Finally, he nodded slowly. All right. I'll investigate the Harrisons properly. If their papers don't hold up to scrutiny, then Belle's actions, while irregular, were ultimately in service of justice. He looked at Belle directly. But you can't come back to Copper Ridge. Even if you're cleared of kidnapping, too many people saw what happened. Drake will make your life hell, and others will see you as an Indian lover. I have no intention of returning, Belle said quietly. I've found something here worth more than anything Copper Ridge could offer. Vernon Drake let loose a string of curses, but Sheriff Brennan silenced him with a sharp look. The cavalry lieutenant appeared ready to argue, but Brennan's authority carried the day. Slowly, reluctantly, the posse began to turn their horses. Belle, Brennan called out one last time. You're sure about this? Life with the Cherokee won't be easy, especially for a white woman. Belle looked back at where Uahali waited with the other children. At the warriors who had accepted her, at Chief Oconostoda who had offered his protection. I'm sure, Tom, for the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. As the posse rode away through the pass, tension drained from the valley. Warriors lowered their weapons, and Belle felt her hands begin to shake with delayed reaction. Dakota rode close and steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. You have courage, he said with approval. To face down armed men with only words takes strength many warriors lack. Oconostoda rode up on her other side. You have made your choice clear before witnesses. You are Cherokee now if you wish it. Your old life is ended. Belle met his eyes and saw not just gratitude, but something deeper. A recognition of shared understanding and perhaps the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for. I wish it, she said firmly. Whatever comes, I'll face it here. As they rode back toward the camp, Uahali broke free from the women and ran to meet them, her face radiant with joy. She reached up toward Belle, who dismounted to catch her. The child spoke rapidly in Cherokee, and this time Belle caught one word she recognized. Igato. She says you are home now. Dakota translated with a smile. She says the spirits have answered her prayers. Belle held the little girl close, feeling the fierce beating of her small heart, and knew that despite all the challenges ahead, despite the cultural divide and the uncertain future, this moment was exactly right. She had found her place, not through careful planning, but through following her conscience and opening her heart. The sun climbed toward noon as they entered the camp to celebration, and Belle Hammond began her new life among the Cherokee. No longer an outsider, but a woman who had earned her place through fire and courage. 3 weeks had passed since Belle's confrontation with the posse at the valley entrance. Word had reached the Cherokee camp through friendly traders that Sheriff Brennan had indeed investigated the Harrisons and discovered their documents were forgeries purchased from a corrupt territorial agent. The couple now sat in jail awaiting trial, and the 2 Cherokee boys they had sold were being sought by federal marshals. Belle's name had been cleared of kidnapping charges, though she remained wanted by Vernon Drake for the stolen horses. A debt Chief Oconostoda had satisfied by sending 4 fine animals to Copper Ridge with a terse message that the matter was settled. Life in the Cherokee camp had challenged Belle in ways she never anticipated. The language barrier frustrated her daily, though Uahali delighted in teaching her words and phrases, giggling at Belle's clumsy pronunciation. The physical demands of camp life, hauling water, preparing hides, gathering firewood, left her exhausted each night. Her burned hands had healed slowly under Nalani's continued care, leaving pink scars that would mark her forever, but there were unexpected joys too. The Cherokee women, initially wary, had begun accepting her as they saw her willingness to work and learn. An older woman named Adzila had taken Belle under her guidance, teaching her how to prepare food in the traditional way, how to identify useful plants, how to construct and maintain a lodge. Adzila spoke no English, communicating through gestures and demonstrations that required Belle to pay careful attention. Uahali had become Belle's constant shadow when the child wasn't occupied with lessons from the tribal elders or playing with other children. The little girl would slip her hand into Belle's while they walked, or curl up beside her at night in the lodge Belle now shared with Adzila and 2 other unmarried women. The attachment had deepened into genuine love on both sides, and Belle found herself thinking of Uahali as the daughter she had never had. Chief Oconostota maintained a respectful distance, though Belle often felt his eyes on her as she moved through camp. He would speak with her in the evening sometimes, asking about her adjustment and answering her questions about Cherokee customs. Their conversations were brief and formal, but Belle sensed an undercurrent of something unspoken, a connection neither of them quite knew how to acknowledge. On this particular morning, Belle woke to find the camp buzzing with unusual activity. Warriors were checking weapons and preparing for what looked like a major expedition. She found Dakota near the horse corral and approached him with concern. "What's happening? Is there danger?" Belle asked. Dakota turned from examining his bow. "We go to the autumn gathering, where several Cherokee bands meet to trade, share news, and celebrate the harvest. It is tradition that brings our scattered people together, if only for a short time." He smiled slightly. "You will come. Chief Oconostota insists you see more of Cherokee ways." Belle felt both excitement and apprehension. Meeting more Cherokee people meant more scrutiny, more judgment of the white woman living among them. But it also meant learning more about the culture she was trying to understand. The camp departed 2 days later, a procession of families on horseback and on foot, carrying possessions and trade goods. Belle rode alongside Adzila, who had warmed to her considerably and now treated her almost like a daughter. Uahali rode with her father at the front of the column, though she frequently looked back to make sure Belle was still there. The journey took 3 days through mountain passes and hidden valleys that revealed the vastness of Cherokee territory. They passed ancient rock formations that Dakota explained held spiritual significance, and streams where the water ran so clear Belle could see every stone on the bottom. The land itself seemed alive with history and meaning that Belle was only beginning to grasp. When they finally reached the gathering place, Belle was overwhelmed by the sight. Hundreds of Cherokee from different bands had assembled in a broad meadow surrounded by protective mountains. Lodges spread in every direction, cooking fires sent smoke skyward, and the sound of drums and singing filled the air. Children ran wild in packs while adults conducted business or renewed old friendships. Belle noticed immediately how people stared at her. Some looks were curious, others hostile, and a few showed contempt. She kept her head high and stayed close to Adzila, who seemed to serve as a protective presence. Uahali had run off to play with children from other bands, her laughter carrying back to where Belle stood taking in the spectacle. That evening, the chiefs of the gathered bands met in council while the rest of the people celebrated with feasting and dancing. Belle sat with the women of Oconostota's band, learning names and trying to follow conversations conducted in rapid Cherokee. A young woman named Enola, who had learned some English from traders, took pity on Belle and translated key points. "They speak of the white soldiers pushing westward," Enola explained quietly, "of lands being taken and promises being broken. Some argue for war, others for moving further into the mountains where whites cannot follow easily." Belle listened, feeling the weight of her white skin more heavily than ever. These people discussed survival strategies because people who looked like her were systematically destroying their way of life. How could she truly belong here when she represented everything they had reason to hate? Her dark thoughts were interrupted by Uahali's return. The child climbed into Belle's lap, sticky with the honey-sweetened bread she had been eating. She chattered in Cherokee, her words tumbling over each other in excitement about the friends she had made and the games she had played. "She is happy," Enola observed with a smile. "She speaks of you often, saying the spirits sent you to be her new mother." Belle's heart clenched. "I'm not her mother. I could never replace the woman who gave her life. No one asks you to replace Ayanna," Enola said gently. "But a child can love more than one mother. And you have already claimed a place in Uohali's heart whether you intended to or not." The council meeting broke up as full darkness fell, and the chiefs emerged to join the celebration. Belle saw Conestoga immediately, his tall frame and bearing making him stand out even among other leaders. He moved through the crowd with quiet authority, speaking briefly with various people before his eyes found Belle. The chief approached, and the women around Belle grew quiet. Conestoga spoke in Cherokee, his words directed at Belle, though she couldn't understand them. Enola translated with barely concealed excitement. "Chief Conestoga says you will walk with him. He wishes to speak of important matters." Belle's pulse quickened as she gently moved Uohali from her lap and stood. The other women watched with knowing smiles as Belle followed the chief away from the fires and into the quieter darkness beyond the lodges. They walked in silence for a time, the sounds of celebration fading behind them. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the meadow. Finally, Conestoga stopped near a grove of ancient trees and turned to face Belle. "You have been with my people for 3 weeks," he said in English. "You have worked hard and complained little. You have honored our ways and shown respect even when you do not understand. This is not easy for you. Nothing worth doing is easy," Belle replied. "I'm grateful for the chance to learn. My daughter loves you," Conestoga continued, his voice softening. "She speaks of you constantly. She asks when you will become her true mother." Belle's breath caught. "Chief Conestoga, I care deeply for Uohali, but I cannot presume to take such a role without—" "Without what?" He interrupted gently. "Without being asked? Belle Hammond, I am asking. Not just for my daughter's sake, though that would be reason enough. I ask for myself as well." Belle stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. The moonlight illuminated his face, showing vulnerability beneath the chief's usual stern mask. "When Ayanna died, I believed my heart died with her," Conestoga said quietly. "For 3 years I have been half a man, performing my duties, but feeling nothing. Then you arrived, risking everything to save my daughter. I saw your courage, your kindness, your strength. And I began to feel again. You barely know me." Belle protested weakly. "I know what matters," the chief said firmly. "I know you dove into fire while others watched. I know you chose to help Uohali even when it cost you everything. I know you face each day in a strange place among strange people with dignity and determination. What more do I need to know?" Belle struggled to find words. "Your people already question my presence here. If you take a white woman as your wife, it will divide them. Some will never accept it, some will not," Conestoga acknowledged. "But many will understand that the heart chooses its own path. And as chief, I must sometimes make decisions that not everyone approves of. I ask only what you feel, Belle Hammond. Can you see yourself building a life here? Can you see yourself as mother to Uohali and wife to me?" Belle looked up at this proud man who had opened his heart to her, who offered not just protection, but partnership. She thought of Uohali's laughter, of the satisfaction she felt learning Cherokee ways, of the strange sense of belonging she had begun to experience. Then she thought of the alternative, returning to a world where she would always be the woman who had betrayed her own kind, forever marked as an outcast. "I can see it," Belle said slowly. "But I need you to understand that I will make mistakes. I will struggle with your language and misunderstand your customs. There will be days when I feel lost and uncertain, and I will be there to guide you," Conestoga said, stepping closer. as you will guide me in understanding the white world that presses ever closer to our lands. We will learn from each other." He reached out and took her scarred hands gently, examining the marks left by fire. "These scars tell the story of who you are, a woman willing to be burned to save a child. I would be honored to walk beside such a woman." Belle felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I never expected to find this. I came here only to return Uahali to her family. The spirits work in mysterious ways," Okanastota said. "Perhaps they brought you here for many reasons, not just one. Perhaps saving Uahali was only the beginning." He leaned forward slowly, giving Belle time to pull away if she wished. But she didn't pull away. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and questioning, an exploration of possibility. Belle felt something inside her chest unlock, a door opening onto a future she had never dared imagine. When they returned to the celebration, walking side by side, the news spread through the gathering like wildfire. Belle saw mixed reactions, some faces showing approval, others concern, and a few displaying open disapproval. But Okanastota's hand remained firm on her back, his message clear that Belle Hammond was now under his protection in the most complete way possible. Uahali spotted them and came running, her face alight with joy. She had understood immediately what the change in their relationship meant. The child threw her arms around both Belle and her father, chattering excitedly in Cherokee. Dakota approached with a wide smile. "It seems the spirits have blessed my chief with wisdom," Dakota said, "and blessed Belle Hammond with a family she has earned through her courage." Over the next 2 days of the gathering, Belle met the other chiefs and their families. Some greeted her warmly, recognizing her as the woman who had saved Okanastota's daughter. Others were more reserved, withholding judgment until time proved whether this union would strengthen or weaken their band. An elderly chief named Atakolakula, respected for his wisdom, took Belle aside on the final day. "The path you walk will not be easy," he said in careful English. "You will face prejudice from whites who see you as a traitor, and from Cherokee who see you as an invader. Your children, if you have them, will belong to neither world completely." Belle had already considered this. "I know, but hiding from difficulty has never served me well. I'd rather face challenges alongside people I love and live safely among those who see me as property." Atakalakula smiled, his weathered face creasing with approval. "Okanastota has chosen well. You have the spirit of a warrior, even if you were not born to our people. May your union bring strength to us all in the difficult times ahead." The journey back to their home valley felt different to Belle. She was no longer a guest or an outsider seeking acceptance. She was returning home as the chief's chosen wife, with all the responsibilities and privileges that entailed. Adzila had taken her aside before they left the gathering and explained what would happen next. "There will be a ceremony when we return," Adzila said through Enola's translation. "The elders will bless the union, and you will be given a Cherokee name to mark your new life. You will move into the chief's lodge with Uahali. The women will teach you what you need to know to manage a chief's household." Belle felt overwhelmed by the enormity of what she had agreed to. But each time doubt crept in, she would look at Uahali riding nearby or feel Okanastota's steady presence, and her resolve would strengthen. This was right, even if it was difficult. The ceremony took place 3 days after their return, as autumn colors blazed across the mountain valley. Belle wore a dress of soft deerskin that the women had decorated with intricate beadwork, a gift that represented their acceptance. Her hair had been braided with feathers and small shells in the Cherokee style. The entire band gathered as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The tribal elder, a woman named Ga'alahi, who served as spiritual guide, spoke at length in Cherokee. Dakota stood beside Belle and translated quietly. She speaks of how the spirits sometimes bring people together across great divides. She says your arrival was foretold in dreams, a white woman with fire in her hands who would bring change and healing. She says you have proven yourself worthy through action, not words. She says you will be called Atsila, which means fire. Because you walked through flames to save a child. Tears streamed down Belle's face as she accepted her new name, Atsila. It felt right. Marking the end of Belle Hammond and the beginning of someone new. Okonostoda stepped forward and took her hands. He spoke in Cherokee, his voice carrying across the gathering. Dakota continued translating. The chief says before all witnesses that you are now his wife, mother to Uahali, and member of this band. He says your past no longer defines you. He says you are Cherokee now and forever. The ceremony concluded with feasting and celebration that lasted long into the night. Uahali refused to leave Belle's side, her small hand clutching her new mother's dress, as if afraid Belle might disappear. When the child finally fell asleep exhausted, Okonostoda carried her to the lodge that would now be their home. Belle stood at the entrance of the chief's lodge, suddenly nervous. This was the moment when her new life truly began, when there was no more pretending or preparing. Okonostoda emerged and stood beside her, seeming to sense her hesitation. You are afraid, he observed. Terrified, Belle admitted. What if I fail? What if I cannot be what Uahali needs, what you need, what the band needs? Okonostoda turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You have already proven yourself in the most important ways. The rest we will figure out together, one day at a time. That is all anyone can do. Belle looked up at this man who had given her a home, a family, a purpose. I will do my best to honor the faith you have placed in me. You already do, Okonostoda said softly. Simply by being who you are, they entered the lodge together, and Belle saw that the women had prepared it beautifully. Fresh furs covered the sleeping area. A fire burned warmly in the center, and Uahali slept peacefully on a raised platform. This was home now, not the tiny room above the Silver Star Saloon. Not the homestead she had briefly owned in Copper Ridge. This lodge in a hidden valley. With a child who called her mother and a man who had chosen her despite every reason not to. Over the following weeks, Belle settled into her new role. She learned to manage the chief's household, to participate in women's councils, to mediate minor disputes that came to the chief's wife for resolution. The Cherokee language gradually became more familiar, though she still struggled with complex concepts. Uahali thrived under the security of having both a father and a mother. Her nightmares about the Harrisons fading as she grew confident in her safety. Okonostoda proved to be a patient husband, giving Belle time to adjust before expecting more than companionship. They spent evenings by the fire while he taught her Cherokee history, and she shared stories of her own past. Slowly, understanding deepened into affection, and affection into love. One evening as winter approached, Belle sat outside the lodge watching Uahali play with other children. Dakota approached and sat beside her on a log bench. You look content, he observed. I am, Belle said, surprised to realize it was completely true. More than I ever thought possible. The band has accepted you, Dakota said. Even those who doubted now see that you belong here. You work hard, you treat everyone with respect, and you make our chief happy. That matters, Belle smiled. I heard some of the warriors call me the Fire Woman yesterday. I wasn't sure if it was meant as an insult or a compliment. Definitely a compliment, Dakota assured her. Warriors respect courage above all else. You have proven yours many times over. As they sat in comfortable silence, Belle reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. 6 weeks ago, she had been a trapped woman serving drinks in a saloon, seeing no way out and no hope for a different future. Then a wagon had caught fire, a child had needed help, and everything had changed. She had lost everything from her old life, her few possessions, her independence, her place in white society. But she had gained so much more, a daughter, a husband, a community, and most importantly, a sense of purpose and belonging she had never known before. Uahali ran over and climbed into Belle's lap, breathless from playing. She spoke in Cherokee, her words now familiar to Belle's ear. She says she is happy you are her mother, Dakota translated unnecessarily. As Belle had understood perfectly, Belle hugged the child close, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and pine that clung to her hair. Tell her I am happy too. Tell her I am exactly where I am meant to be, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and crimson. Belle felt profound gratitude for the courage that had led her to dive into flames weeks ago. She had saved a child and in doing so, had saved herself. The fire had burned away her old life, yes, but from those ashes had risen something new and precious. Chief Oconostota emerged from the lodge and smiled at the sight of his wife and daughter together. He joined them, placing his hand on Belle's shoulder in a gesture of affection and unity. Together they watched the day end and night begin, a family forged not by blood, but by choice. Courage and love. Belle Hammond was gone, transformed into Atsila, the firewoman who had walked through flames and emerged not destroyed, but reborn. And as the first stars appeared overhead, she knew with absolute certainty that she was finally truly home. 2 years had passed since Belle Hammond became Atsila, the firewoman of the Cherokee. The valley had seen 2 full cycles of seasons, 2 winters of snow and 2 summers of plenty. Much had changed in that time, both within the hidden sanctuary and in the world beyond the mountains. Atsila stood outside the chief's lodge in the early morning light, her hand resting on her swollen belly. She was 6 months pregnant with her first child, a fact that had brought joy to the entire band. Uahali, now 8 years old and growing tall, had taken the news of a coming sibling with fierce protectiveness, constantly checking on Atsila and bringing her things she thought a pregnant mother might need. The girl emerged from the lodge now, her long black hair neatly braided in the style Atsila had taught her, a blend of Cherokee and the simpler methods Atsila had learned back east. Uahali spoke in rapid Cherokee, which Atsila now understood as fluently as English. Father says the traders have arrived from the east. They bring news from the white settlements, Uahali reported, her expression troubled. He wants you to hear what they say. Atsila nodded and followed her daughter toward the center of camp, where a small group had gathered around 3 weathered traders. She recognized them as men who moved between both worlds, carrying goods and information. They dealt honestly with the Cherokee, which made them valuable sources of intelligence about the increasing pressure from white expansion. Oconostota stood with Dakota and several other warriors, his face grave as he listened to the traders speak. When he saw Atsila approach, he reached out and drew her close to his side, his hand protective on her back. The lead trader, a grizzled man named Harrison, not related to the couple who had stolen Uahali, nodded respectfully to Atsila. He had learned over multiple visits that the chief's white wife commanded respect in the camp, and often served as a bridge for understanding between cultures. Mrs. Oconostota. Harrison always used this formal address, his way of showing respect. I bring troubling news from the territorial government. There's talk of new policies, more aggressive relocation efforts. The army's been reinforced at Fort Verde. Atsila translated quickly for those who didn't understand English, her Cherokee now smooth and confident. She saw worry ripple through the gathered crowd. How much time do we have? Oconostota asked in English, which he had been learning from Atsila. Harrison shook his head. Hard to say. Could be months, could be a year. But the pressure's building. Some bands have already been forced west. The government wants all Cherokee moved to designated territories. We will not leave our ancestral lands, Oconostota said firmly. These mountains are our home. Our people are buried here. We have survived by staying hidden and avoiding conflict. I know, Chief, Harrison said sympathetically. I'm just telling you what's coming. Thought you should be prepared. After the traders left with furs and crafts to sell in the settlements, Oconostota called a council meeting. Atsila attended, as she now did for all important discussions, her unique perspective valued by the leadership. The debate was heated, with younger warriors arguing for armed resistance and elders counseling continued avoidance. Atsila listened carefully before speaking. The white government is like a river that cannot be stopped, only redirected. Direct confrontation will bring overwhelming force against us. But complete submission means losing everything that makes us Cherokee. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Perhaps there is a middle path. We could send emissaries to the territorial capital, use legal channels to argue for our right to remain here. I could go with them, show that Cherokee and whites can live in peace. You would risk yourself and our unborn child? Okanostoda asked, his concern evident. I would risk a journey to potentially save our entire community, Atsila replied. My presence might make white officials see Cherokee as people, not obstacles. And Dakota could accompany me for protection. The discussion continued for hours, but eventually, Atsila's proposal gained support. It was decided that after the baby was born, and she had recovered, she would travel with a small delegation to make their case. It was a slim hope, but better than waiting passively for soldiers to arrive. That evening, Atsila and Okanostoda sat outside their lodge while Uahali practiced shooting arrows at a target Dakota had set up for her. The child had become skilled with the bow, her aim true and her form excellent. Are you certain about this journey? Okanostoda asked quietly, watching their daughter. The white world rejected you once. Returning to it, even briefly, could be dangerous. Atsila placed her hand over his. I was rejected by one small town that saw me as property. But there are good people in the white world too. People like Doc Morrison and Sheriff Brennan who understand justice. If I can find those people in positions of power, maybe I can make them see what will be lost if they destroy this place. Okanostoda pulled her close, his hand gentle on her belly where their child grew. You have given me more than I ever hoped for after Ayana's death. A full heart, a happy daughter, and now a child to come. I cannot bear the thought of losing you. You won't lose me, Atsila promised. I didn't walk through fire and build a life here just to give it up now. I'll do whatever it takes to protect our family and our people. 3 months later, Atsila gave birth to a healthy son they named Weya, which meant wolf. The birth was difficult, but the Cherokee women surrounded her with care and expertise, and both mother and child came through safely. Uahali was enchanted with her baby brother, spending hours watching him sleep and insisting on helping with his care. As Atsila recovered, holding her newborn son while Uahali sat beside her and Okanostoda watched with pride. She marveled at how completely her life had transformed. The scared, trapped woman who had served drinks in the Silver Star Saloon felt like someone from another lifetime. What are you thinking? Okanostoda asked, reading her expression. I'm thinking about the moment I saw Uahali in that burning wagon, Atsila said softly. How I didn't hesitate, didn't think about consequences, just knew I had to help. That single decision led to everything. This family, this life I never knew I needed. The spirits knew, Uahali said wisely, stroking her baby brother's tiny hand. They sent the fire to bring you to us. Atsila smiled at her daughter's faith in destiny. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps every hardship Atsila had endured. The loveless marriage, the servitude in the saloon, the years of loneliness, had all been preparing her for the moment when she would be needed most. Outside the lodge, the valley continued its eternal rhythms. Children played, women worked, warriors trained, and elders shared wisdom with the young. The Cherokee way of life persisted in this hidden place, threatened but not yet broken. And at the heart of it all, a white woman who had become Cherokee held her infant son and her adopted daughter close. While her husband kept watch over the family he had built from the ashes of loss, the future remained uncertain, full of challenges and potential heartbreak. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. There was love. There was home. And Atsila, The firewoman who had walked through flames to save a child and found salvation in return knew that whatever trials lay ahead, she would face them with the same courage that had defined her from the beginning. The fire that had nearly destroyed Uohali had instead forged something unbreakable. A family bound not by blood alone, but by choice, sacrifice, and the kind of love that transcends all the divisions humans create. And that, Atsila knew, was worth fighting for with every breath in her body.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.